lot of new faces taking the field for the Buffalo Bills this year in a semi-new offensive coordinator who took over midway through last season. We got a lot to get to. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone Podcast.
And I'm Andy Young. Week 2 of organized team activities underway, and there is a lot going on out there.
I was going to say, when I first listened to Joe Brady's press conference yesterday and some of the players and what's going on and what we're seeing, very interesting stuff to look forward to this year. Now you have Josh Allen on a podcast radio program with Doug Farrar, Touchdown Wire, NFL editor for USA Today, Andy, and Josh Allen putting comments out into the universe right now that will automatically cause a bit of a stir and questioning everything you've seen with your own two eyes the last 5 years or so.
Yeah, Allen was discussing Joe Brady taking over as offensive coordinator, removing the interim tag, and having that full offseason to implement his own system, his own attack. And Josh said one of the comments he made to Doug Farrar was, we're not just doing the same mundane things that we've been doing for the last 6 years. Now, that'll get the headlines, and we'll talk about that too. But I think Allen was referring to just kind of the change in attitude, the energy, those sorts of things that Joe Brady brings to the table. And, yeah, he's going to put some of his own ideas and philosophies into the Bills' offense. I think it's a whole lot about nothing, but it is interesting to think about given where the Bills have been offensively the last 5 or 6 years.
I mean, they've been good, Andy.
They've been very good.
Near the top of the league. I think this all stems from Brian Daboll was good, and it seemed like Ken Dorsey was asked to just carry over what they were doing with Brian Daboll, and I think they're shifting away from that. I think the meaning of mundane goes to anything you do in life that you're doing repeatedly over and over again without changes. I don't take it as Josh Allen saying that the Bills' offense was boring under Brian Daboll and Ken Dorsey. I just feel that, your job, going to the gym every day, you need to do it. You want to do it to stay in shape, but that's mundane.
So you tried some different workouts, different exercises.
So
you go somewhere else. Right.
Or you try a sport or something like that. It's not saying, working out is mundane. It's saying I need a change in whatever. I ran for the bulk of my 20s, 30s, and 40s, but then started playing hockey again in my 40s. It was like, I'd rather play hockey than just run 10 miles looking straight ahead and getting bored. Running became mundane to me. Do I wish I could still do it? I do, because there's things like half marathons and stuff like that everyone goes around, or 5Ks and stuff. But my body just can't do it anymore. It's just not used to running, and I'm at the point where that doesn't matter.
I find it remarkable also that you're playing hockey into your 70s.
It's unbelievable, right? Some of us get there, Andy.
Good genes, Kevin.
Yeah, just around the corner. But I just feel that when you say mundane, it doesn't necessarily have to mean what we were doing was boring. We're now getting a little more excitement. I'm not saying there's not more excitement coming. I have the feeling there is. But when you listen to Allen's comments, my immediate reaction was, well, anything gets mundane after a while.
For the sake of discussion, let's look back at the Bills' offensive ranks in terms of yards and points. Now, there's certainly other metrics of efficiency out there that might better indicate where things are. But just for argument's sake, and these are simple statistics, Brian Daboll came in 2019. The Bills ranked 23rd in points, 24th in yards. Year 2, 2020, Diggs comes.
Yeah.
That's the year they really took off. Bills finished 2nd in points, 2nd in yards. 2021, 3rd in points, 5th in yards. 2022, 2nd in points, 2nd in yards. Last year, splitting between Dorsey and Joe Brady, 6th in points, 4th in yards. So probably that's been – last year was one of their worst years, and they still finished basically in the top 5 in offense.
Yeah.
So to say that it's mundane might be just Josh making the exact point that you are, that, yeah, they've run the same sorts of plays, same sorts of concepts. Keep in mind, they've got a whole new wide receiver crew this year, too, with some different skill sets than they've had in past years that they want to utilize. So, of course, Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator, is going to try his best to put those guys in positions to succeed, and that might mean doing something different than Josh Allen and the Bills were used to over the last several years. But I think that dovetails into the next point of what Joe Brady's comments were about what he wants to bring to the Bills offense.
Well, and it doesn't sound like, and it's funny that Josh's comments coming a day after Joe Brady says, well, this is Josh Allen's offense. I'm not going to fix something that wasn't broken. I don't want to put Josh in a position where he's back on a learning curve, or he now has to process stuff differently as plays unfold in front of him. And all that combined, you have those new bodies. You have, as Brady put there, I got to see what I can do with these guys. We haven't had these guys. You had Stefon Diggs and Gabe Davis as your guys for all that period of time that we've been talking about. And to loop back just for a sec about the mundane thing, didn't we notice the past couple of years that as the season went on, it just seemed like the Bills' offense was stuck in the mud? And then Brady takes over, less balls to Stefon Diggs, more of the ground game, working off that same offensive scheme, but doing it differently and setting it up differently. I hear from some of Joe Brady's comments about Stefon Diggs that maybe that's just part of this plan all along. We might have been shocked they were moving on from Diggs, but maybe towards the end of last season, it was becoming more apparent that they could not operate like that anymore and have success. Eventually, they're going to have to change. I'm not going to put words in people's mouths, but I'm not sure Diggs didn't like what the idea was and less targets, wanted to move on, and maybe it turns out to be a win-win for everyone, but the eye test tells me that part of the mundane comment was the last two seasons, even though the Bills did great coming down the stretch, they weren't that explosive offense. Those were games, Andy, where everyone was like, just win, just hang on and win. Mm-hmm. And we weren't used to that.
I find it interesting that the last couple of years, it seems the Bills, through the early portions of seasons, offensively, were pretty good. You had like the clunker against the Jets last year, but then they were pretty good after that for a while, and then they hit the midseason lull. That's happened a few times over the last several years.
Right.
And then, like you said, they get hot down the stretch or just survive in their market a little.
And then you get into the playoffs, and those are teams you can't just survive against.
Right. So it's going to be interesting to see how Joe Brady is able to navigate that going into this season, given that he does not have, at this time, what we believe on paper to be a true number one wide receiver. Mm-hmm. He has a bunch of pieces who I think offensively can be successful, and he can deploy them in a host of different ways. And it might be beneficial to some degree that they don't have a Diggs, and just in that defenses don't know what's coming. I don't think that they're still better on paper without Stefon Diggs. He's just that good. Others might disagree with me, but I think the back end of their receiver group is probably better than it's been the last couple of years.
More depth. I mean, when you would watch games, if something happened to Gabe Davis or Stefon Diggs, you were like, oh, man, the Bills are in trouble now. You look at this roster right now, and you're like, there's some talented wide receiver that's not going to be on this roster against the Arizona Cardinals come week 1, and that's just where they're at right now. So to me, it's actually cool what Joe Brady gets to do with seeing all these guys and seeing what Josh Allen's rapport is with them. You have wide receivers that are taller now, that jump ball down the sideline. You just weren't getting that. You weren't getting stuff other teams vying for championships had on their roster. You just didn't have it. And I always had, personally, this thing with Stefon Diggs, I thought had the tendency to, I'm catching the ball, I'm going to the ground. I'm not trying to pick up extra yards.
I've heard you say that before.
I made a great catch. I got it, and I don't have a problem with that if you're the possession receiver on the team. Just get to the sticks and get down. You're the superstar on the team behind Josh Allen. You expect more from someone, and he did it against the Dolphins. When he didn't go down, he was able to pull away and score in, week 3, week 4?
Not to go too far down the Diggs rabbit hole, but he also kept himself available on the field by avoiding injuries too.
I get it.
And so he was highly productive doing that. I'm more of I think you're a little more, I won't say anti-Diggs than I was. Obviously, the two sides needed to have a divorce.
Mm-hmm.
It was over. But I think you're going to feel that loss. We'll see. Maybe in time they develop something else, and it's a different offensive identity. I think that's going to be a key to this season. What is the Bills' offensive identity? And is it just like it's been, hey, Josh, go out there and figure it out.
Right.
Be Superman. Now, when Josh was highly efficient last season and leading the league in completion percentage and all those things, that came at the expense of the big plays. Then when Josh starts going to hero ball, you get some more of those amazing plays, but the efficiency goes down. How do you unlock both of those? And what is the identity? What do the Bills like to do? What is their bread and butter that another team can't stop? Does it become going to the run game more? Is it the 2 tight end sets with Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid? Is it we spread it out? You'd like to see them have some things where it's not just we want to be multiple and we want to have variety for the sake of doing those things to keep a defense off balance. At the end of the day, you have to have certain things that you do really well and survive on those. So it's important, I think, through this process, through OTAs, minicamp, and into training camp, for the Bills to kind of figure out an identity and something to hang their hat on. Now, you can hang your hat on Josh Allen for sure. And Joe Brady said that. Like, look, we're not going to reinvent the wheel here and try to confuse Josh Allen. He said the last thing I want to do is have Josh out there thinking and not just playing fast and playing well. Same time, Josh said, we've got to get better in a whole host of areas. I've got to get better with my footwork, with reading the defense, with leading receivers, and I think that all works together to them finding that offensive identity and the things they want to be. Like, think about 2020, and they came out and they were going 3 and 4 wide receivers and just slinging the football all over the field. That was an amazing year, right? Especially because people didn't expect Josh Allen to be able to do that.
Oh, yeah.
But that was their identity that year. And then they got knocked at times for not being able to run the football. Now, last year they started to run the football quite a bit better. Will that become part of their identity? We'll see.
Maybe you're actually right that they don't have a single identity. Their identity will be Josh Allen, no matter what. With the group of wide receivers, you have James Cook, who's just coming on as a running back, and more than likely a rookie behind him, spelling him with Ty Montgomery in the
Ty Johnson.
Who's Ty Montgomery?
He was another former running back.
Oh.
Not former running back. A running back in the league. He's played for a couple different teams.
Okay.
You don't even play fantasy football, do you?
No, I can't stand fantasy football. But again, you're right.
We should have a podcast about that sometime too.
Yeah, let's do a fantasy football podcast. Here's my contribution to that. That's it. That's all I have to say about fantasy football.
So it's kind of like what we're doing right now.
Pretty much.
All right.
It's not like I'm out there that much. But to my point, Andy, is that maybe it's one of those things where it's just a collective offense that Josh Allen has options to pass it. Josh Allen can still run the ball. You would expect that to still be part of this game plan. And now you have a running back that's coming onto the scene that with running backs behind them. And let's not, of course, this is dumb to say, but Dalton Kincaid, in all of this picture, maybe this turns into, like what you had with like Tom Brady and Gronk or other quarterbacks. I think Dallas Clark and Peyton Manning back in the day, where it's centered around what they're doing and everything else feeds off of what they're able to do between Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, it's kind of working inside out instead of outside in. If Kincaid becomes your number one option, which I think is likely. I think that there's a good chance that that happens. One thing I want to bring up in an observation from OTAs.
I forgot Patrick Mahomes and Chris Kelsey.
Chris Kelsey?
Travis Kelsey.
Dude, you are not on it with the names
Let's
today.
start this podcast over. We'll make a clean cut right here. Now go on.
All right. So, observing practice at OTAs on Tuesday in week 2, a lot of work on the short passing game. Maybe that's their identity. That if teams are going to take the over-the-top stuff away, let's dink and dunk. Let's be really good at that, and let's get the yards after catch. Maybe they become a rack team where the run after the catch, where jet sweeps with Curtis Samuel become something, where you're going to use Keon Coleman to use his body to shield guys off on slant routes and things like that, which I saw a couple of times they connected with in practice. And, of course, you hit Dalton Kincaid, too. And then you've got guys like MVS that can take the top off the defense. That could be an option, right? That maybe is part of their identity. Using James Cook, using Ty Johnson, using Ray Davis, the running backs in the passing game too. I am all for the more explosive wide receivers and really bulking that up. They've changed the wide receiver room. We'll see if in turn that makes them more explosive.
I'm thinking, too, as the season goes on, maybe a little more play action from this team now that they have a running game. And I know there's always talk out there that even if you don't run the ball well, that was good grammar right there by me. Got to have good grammar.
You can bring that up if you want at the end.
Oh, it's coming at the end.
Okay.
But, yeah, it said that you actually don't need a good running game to pull off play action. But I think with Josh Allen and the options you have out of it and keeping the defense honest and the fact that you have these new taller wide receivers, again, Dalton Kincaid, 1 year through an NFL season already, might be a better option. But, again, it's early. Joe Brady doesn't know exactly what he's going to be able to do with the wide receivers they brought in. I sure as hell don't know what they're going to be able to do. I know what some of these receivers have done and are capable of doing. But it just seems like a better attack to me than maybe running out of the shotgun, draws out of the shotgun, and stuff like that.
I also found it interesting that in reference to Curtis Samuel, one of the Bills' new wide receiver additions, Brady said that having worked with him in the past and then watching what he did in Washington, that sometimes people get pigeonholed or boxed into what you've seen, and they think that's all you can do. And maybe there's more in there. There's other things that you can do. To me, that's a reference that they're going to expect more in a bigger role and more abilities out of Curtis Samuel than maybe we saw in Washington. He had the best year of his career back in 2020 with the Panthers, where Joe Brady was the offensive coordinator. I think you're going to see a lot of Curtis Samuel in maybe some roles that people aren't expecting because they think he can do it. He just hasn't been asked to do it or used in that way because people have an assumption about, and this is coaches, this is the way he's used, about the way he's able to play and the things he can do on the field. And Joe Brady maybe is looking to unlock more from Curtis Samuel, who isn't the biggest guy in the world, but he's strong, he's fast, he's versatile. Maybe they're looking for something different out of him than he's given over the last several years in the NFL. I
got to tell you, it's pretty exciting this time of year right now, looking at all the possibilities and looking what could lie ahead for this Bills team, rather than sit here right now talking about, are we going to get more out of this guy? Are we going to get less out of this guy?
We just don't know yet.
The possibilities, Andy, are endless right now, and it's week 2 of organized team activities. And I got to ask you this. We talked about Mac Hollins last week. Initial thoughts on him. Me, full disclosure on what we do here. Andy's out at practice all the time. I'm on a different shift, but follow what Andy's doing. And you had a lot of video of Mac Hollins, and he looks like a real cool dude to what, like just watching him after a catch, celebrating to a touchdown with no one covering him, and just like looking like a kid having fun playing football.
That guy's got some juice, man, like personality-wise, and I think they've got a room full of those guys right now.
Yeah.
You talk about Keon Coleman and some different people there. Mac Hollins is a guy, and we talked about this last week with Alex Brasky when he was our guest on the podcast. He's going to have a pretty big role. He's got special teams in him. He's been a captain on several teams in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
He's good at blocking downfield, which I know the Bills value, especially when they're running the football and have lost Gabriel Davis. I think Mac Jones. No, yes, Mac Hollins. Yeah, Mac Jones joins the Bills. Mac Hollins he's not going to be a superstar, but there's a place for him, and I think he can make some plays. He had a good season a couple of years ago with the Raiders when Derek Carr was there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this is probably the best quarterback he's had in Josh Allen. So, you know, we'll see. I don't expect massive things out of him, but he's another guy who's going to have a role.
Dawson Knox, this came up last week, and I always was a big fan of Dawson Knox. Watch a couple of he's still got to be in the conversation as a regular as part of this offense right now from what you're seeing out there, right? Because I get the feeling that with all the new receivers, with the focus on Dalton Kincaid, that Dawson Knox might just fade away.
Yeah.
Might not even be on the roster by the time the season starts.
He'll be on the roster because of the contract. He's a player who I think, talking to him at the end of last season, was a little disheartened by what his role became once Dalton Kincaid arrived on the scene. Now, Dawson dealt with some injuries last season, but he became more of the inline blocking tight end option, which to pay a guy like $14 million a year is not optimal to be in that role. Can they get rid of him? Sure, you could do whatever you want to do. They got rid of Diggs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they ate that. But I think they're fine to roll with Knox and Kincaid. I just don't know if he's going to get a whole lot of targets again.
Right.
Like, I think he only had around 20 catches last year. Is that good enough for a guy you're paying that kind of money?
Right.
But maybe his role, they view him as a blocking tight end and a red zone threat and somebody who is a good friend of Josh Allen's and is well-liked on the team and is kind of a leader, a stand-up guy. There's a spot for him there. I just don't know how much he's going to be utilized, and that's problematic given what his salary cap number is.
Any other takeaways from Joe Brady's press conference when it comes to, like, I think for my end, you kind of heard a lot of what you wanted to hear from him going into his first year and or his first full year with the Bills as offensive coordinator.
He's very good in that setting too.
Yeah,
he
is.
Press conference setting.
I don't have any other takeaway from it than it's Josh Allen's offense. We're not changing much, but we're going to look at the talent we have around Josh Allen, find out what each player does best, and have them do what's best, not ask them to do things that they're not really good at, which I'm a big fan of. I said that even in our career, you know, with certain things, certain people are better at certain things. Certain people in the TV business are better as anchors. Some are better suited out in the field because of their comfortability being out there and talking off the cuff and stuff like that, that you want those people not to be put in positions where, well, this is where we want you. We know you're not good at it, but this is where we want you. And obviously as an offensive coordinator, and now they have the time that, let's see, okay, maybe this isn't working with what we wanted to do, and find something else that, oh, wait, that does work.
Some of the more, to circle back to a theme of this conversation where we started, some of the more mundane things.
Is me talking. I
No,
got it.
right. He discussed kind of like the offensive line. There's a little bit of a shakeup there. I asked him about Cedric Van Pran Granger, the draft pick out of Georgia. He gushed about him and his potential to play multiple roles on the offensive line. I kind of asked, do you see a role for him early in his career? Hint, hint, does he have a shot to
Right.
start at center or guard? He didn't go there with it. Like I said, he's good in the press conference setting, so he walked around that one. Just kind of like discussing bringing in Connor McGovern to center, David Edwards at guard, and kind of just reshaping that and talking about this is the time to figure those things out, and it's not going to be perfect. And I don't mind making some mistakes right now because we're trying some new things. We're trying some new people in new places, and that's okay right now. I don't think he's got the mindset like we got to be buttoned up on May 28th or May 29th and be ready to roll. We've got several months till the season starts, and it takes some time.
Other observations, Andy, from OTAs, week 2, while you were out there. One of them amazed me. But go on. They're your observations.
Which one did you want to? Do you want to talk about Tyler Bass?
Yeah, that's incredible to me.
So Tyler Bass kicked a 70-yard field goal against the defense in practice. Outside in Orchard Park. It was heavily wind-assisted, I'll say that.
Okay.
We had gusts probably 15, 20 miles an hour throughout practice. Like, it was enough to where I walked past one of the Bills' PR people, Kevin Kearns, and said, holy cow, it's going to blow me over. Like, I'm carrying the camera, walking down the sideline, and I'm like,
oh, you could hear the wind in the video.
And I weigh more than some of the Bills' offensive linemen, so it takes a lot to say it's going to blow me over. It was windy out there. So anyway, we're watching practice, and they bring out the special teams unit, and out trots Tyler Bass. And we look, and John Scott and I, our old colleague, were talking on the sidelines. John said, hey, so windy, throw it at the 50 and let him just boom one. So we look. He's at the other 40, the far 40. Blasted it and had a couple of yards to spare. Initially, we thought it was a 78-yard field goal.
Right.
Math's not our strong suit. But it was 70. And, Tyler Bass, I think, told one of the reporters after practice that that's the longest he'd ever hit. And, Matthew Smiley, the special teams coordinator, kind of laughed and joked about it with us. Hey, 78 yards. He's like, no, it was 70, and we figured out the math on that. So, excuse me, that was pretty cool to see. A couple of other observations from OTAs. Damar Hamlin has been having a nice run of the couple of sessions that we've seen. He had probably, other than Bass's field goal, the highlight of the day. He had a really nice interception of Josh Allen. Allen was throwing down the seam to running back Ty Johnson, and Damar stepped right up, picked it off, and probably would have taken it to the house. And he's had a nice little stretch here in spring workouts. Yeah, and I think people kind of forgot that. I thought he played pretty well when he was in the lineup a couple of years ago before the cardiac arrest.
Right.
I mean, he wasn't perfect, but he did pretty well when he had to be in there for Micah Hyde. So, we'll see if he can still carve out a spot for himself on the roster. That'll be interesting, and I don't think the talk will be so much about what happened with him on the field.
Yeah.
Like I think we're past that now. And
you think he's battling actually for a spot at least?
I mean, he certainly could be. They brought in a couple of guys. I mean, you'd think Cole Bishop is ahead of him.
Yeah.
Mike Edwards is ahead of him. Taylor Rapp is ahead of him. And then they've used Cam Lewis more too, and they have some other guys back there too. So, they just signed a guy last week too. So, he's certainly, I think, battling for a roster spot, but he's had a good showing so far, I think.
Nice. The other one everyone is curious about because of how the first 2 years of his career has gone is Kaiir Elam, and some good around the cornerback through 2 weeks of OTAs.
Yeah, he's made a couple of plays that we've seen as well. I can point to one Tuesday where Josh was throwing deep downfield to Keelan Coleman along the sidelines, and Elam was there in coverage, and it fell incomplete. That one stood out to me. And then we actually got to talk to Elam after practice among the reporters, and he just said, look, yeah, the last 2 years have been the toughest years of my life. You know, he's a guy who had success everywhere he's been, and to not get on the field, and when he does, he has some good plays and some bad plays. We've seen him get a couple of picks in big spots.
But like the Steelers playoff game, 2 bad plays by him,
Right,
and picks the ball off in the end zone.
Right, and it's that consistency, I think, that might be holding him off the field. One reporter asked him, I believe it may have been Sal Majorana from the Rochester Democrat and Chronicle. Forgive me, Sal, if this wasn't you, but like, was it something in practice? Like, because it seemed like in games you did okay. Was it something you weren't showing in practice that kept you off the field? And he said, you know what? I don't know if it was that, because I prepare hard. I put my best foot forward in practice. I do the best I can. And the coaches just didn't play. But he says he's got a new number. He's back to 5, which he wore all of his life growing up before he got to the NFL. He's got a fresh mindset, and he's ready to grow and learn from what the last 2 years have been. Now, we've heard him talk before about that over the last couple of years. If they can get him to a point where he's good, like they're in a good spot as far as their defensive backfield there in the cornerback room. They're one play away from Rasul Douglas getting hurt, or Christian Benford getting hurt, from him being next man up, because they don't have Dane Jackson anymore. It's important for him to get better, both from a depth perspective and from just like the roster construction and how that looks for Brandon Beane to trade up in the first round and have a complete whiff. He's got to get on the field, right? And at least be the primary backup to those guys, if not more.
It looks like it's trending in that direction. Again, it's way early to even dive deep into that. I do find it, I'm a very superstitious guy. The number thing, wearing number 5 again, wearing something that makes you think you're going to be you because that's you, always amazes me how that carries with you from when you're little, through high school, through college, into the pros, that, wait a minute, I'm X number. I need to be. You have players paying other players to get their number. So maybe it is. Maybe number 5 is all that was needed.
Right. It's funny. That brings up a bigger discussion that I've always really been interested in. And it goes to like sports psychology versus like analytics and numbers and tape. Like, there is some level when you play sports of like confidence and feeling good and those sorts of things. You know, people joke about the term momentum, right? Or team unity or culture. Those things do matter to some degree, because if you just have a bunch of talented players, it doesn't always come together. Why is that? Well, because there's other things that go into it. It's not just how you physically perform, right?
No, it's amazing.
Why do teams have sports psychologists? Because that stuff matters.
I mean, I've had teammates who wore the same underwear for every game, even if it was ripped to shred by the 11th game of the season. Well, we keep winning when I wear this. It's like,
right,
if you and I go golfing, Andy, when you and I golf, you will never see me wear khaki-colored shorts again. Because every time I wear those stinking shorts that technically I have on now, and you and I go golfing, I don't do well. Last time we went out golfing, I had blue shorts on. You beat the crap out of me, but I played better.
You liked your game.
I liked my game that day. I liked the hat I wore that day. I like golfing in that hat. Why am I wearing other golf hats?
Can I just tell you, I played golf last weekend. I'm on a heater right now.
Nice.
Yeah, I played really well again.
Full 18?
We had to only play 9.
Okay, but still.
Yeah, so.
I meant your game was only, it started to teeter off.
Right, so we only played 9, and I played good on that 9, just like the previous time we played. So watch out for me this summer.
All right.
Corn Ferry Tour, here I come.
Oh, there you go. You're not quite up to the old man's tour like me in age yet, right?
No, I'm not.
Senior tour.
I'm not in my 70s.
Oh, I'm so old. Let's do a little 3 and out, Andy.
Yes.
Some football-related topics, some not. I'm going to throw this out here. John used to get ticked at me for doing this, but I thought I saw during the day yesterday that there is talk around the NFL of getting rid of OTAs and moving the start of training camp to earlier July, which leads a lot of people to think that that means the season is extending. Are you a fan of that?
So it's interesting because this was the report said this is the NFLPA who is pushing for this to eliminate OTAs and minicamp and the spring voluntary workouts and then just start training camp earlier, like late June, early July.
Wow. Okay.
So what that would do for the players is, say you miss the playoffs and you're done like the first week of January. That gives you basically just 6 months off altogether to recover, to go live your life, to do what you want, go on vacations, spend time with family. A lot of players don't live in the town they play in, so they want to get out of the city that they play in and get out of town. To me, it's a bargaining chip, ultimately. The report said it's not related, but it can't not be related. That, all right, we're going to go to an 18-game schedule. We're going to have to start earlier, right? Training camp is going to get pushed earlier even still because you need to get an extra week in there, and you're probably going to get a second bye week if you're going to play an 18-game schedule. From our perspective, I hate it.
Yeah.
Because we're part of the beast, and we feed the beast, right?
Yeah.
We cover the NFL year-round. It is by far the sport that you can talk about all the time in the United States of America. And there's always something going on. The NFL has done a fantastic job, whether you like it or not, of making the NFL a talking point with events throughout the year. You get through the season and the playoffs, then you have the combine, then you have the owners' meetings, then you have the draft. A couple weeks after that, it's rookie minicamp, OTAs.
Right.
You get that little 3-week lull in July before training camp starts.
Mm-hmm.
You take that away, you get through the draft, and that's fine at the end of April. What are you going to talk about for the next couple of months if there's no OTAs? We'll find a way to talk about it.
Right.
But
and
there's
the
just
NFL
nothing,
will make sure.
Right, but if there's nothing going on, that's disconcerting on our behalf in our line of work.
Good for the players, not good for us. A week ago, we were talking about watching a series on Netflix. You had never heard of Baby Reindeer.
Oh, God.
You had the
Oh,
the fun time it is to start watching that, and the decision was made incomplete.
we, my wife and I, on your recommendation and Alex Brasky, we discussed last week Baby Reindeer, and I hadn't even heard of it. So I looked it up on Netflix and sat down, and we watched the first episode, and I'm like, this is kind of weird. What's going on? We got through episode 4, and it was so intense and so off-putting, and it just really makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
And we watched 2 episodes one night, and we don't usually sit and binge watch shows, and my wife was like, do you want to watch another one? And I'm like, I got to stop. This is too much. And she was like, Christy was like, yeah, this is just too much. And it's been about a week since then, and I don't know if I'm going to go back to it or not. I do know what happens. I just saw stuff on the internet.
Oh.
Through the rest of the series. That's also off-putting, the conclusion. So I don't know if I'm going to go back to it or not. It's crazy. And the fact that it's a true story and it happened to this guy.
Right.
The actor. My goodness.
I stopped after 2 episodes.
Wait till you get to episode 4.
I might go back, but
oh, my God.
I started watching this new series called Tires on Netflix with Shane Gillis in it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is it's a funny, like, sitcom-y type of thing that takes place at like a Mavis discount tire or something like that, where shenanigans ensue. There's rude customers, rude employees, all that kind of fun you get from a regular sitcom. So that I watched like the first 4 episodes, and then I haven't watched anything since. I don't know what I've been actually doing, but that's where we're at with that, Andy. The big question before we head out is, you said your math is not your strong suit.
It's also not true, but I'm very self-deprecating. But
No,
let's move
I know.
along.
What about grammar? I'll step in.
Go
and
ahead.
say,
Tell the story.
This flabbergasts me. The company got an email from a viewer who actually emails all the time criticizing everything at our station, that the media does, that everyone in the media is just biased towards the left and yada, yada, yada. But he says Andy's grammar is horrible and basically says you need to basically...
Maybe I should go back to grammar school.
To sum it up, right. Go back to school and start from scratch because you're so horrible. Which, if you want to talk about bad grammar, come see me.
I'll have this guy know in high school,
Yeah.
I recorded a 100 on the English ELA Regents exam in New York State.
I still don't know what regents are, but I'm not from New York State.
All right. It's just your basic standardized tests that every school kid takes in high school and throughout.
Well, this is all I'm saying. I've known Andy for some 21, 22 years now. He is the last person I know that I would ever criticize anything about grammar or the product you put out, either written product or on air stuff.
And I can't do anything about how I look, so don't criticize that either. It's water off a duck's back. I mean, you get people who write in and comment and criticize, and that's fine. And I laughed about it, but I did go back to look at the story, and I wonder what the guy was even talking about, where my grammar was poor. But hey, if you're listening, sir, send me a follow-up. Give me some examples.
I often wonder when
I like constructive feedback.
We'll break down this podcast after. I often wonder what goes on in people's heads when they write letters like that. Do they think they're changing anything or doing anything, or is it just, I need to get something off my chest, sending this out? Because you never reply to them.
No.
Although we're replying technically.
Right. There have been times throughout my career where somebody sent me a nasty critical email, and I've replied. And I would typically do so politely, unless it's like a personal attack. And then I might, either I'll take the high road and just ignore it, and sometimes I'll go back at it. It's hard. Like, we don't get a ton of criticism, but when you do, you're like, man, that stinks. Like what I really hate is when somebody critiques somebody's appearance. Right. Like, and I know a lot of our female staff is sensitive to that too, because it happens to them more often throughout the news, the TV news industry, and any kind of, thing where you're on camera a lot. That it's just, why? Like, what purpose does that serve? It's silly. It's weird. Now, if you want to write in and say, man, you got that fact wrong, right? Or even if you want to criticize my grammar, that you don't like my writing style, that's fine. But to go after people's voice or appearance or the clothes they wear, that's horrible. I hate that.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Don't be that guy.
My worst feeling in this business was taking over for someone at a TV station and going to shoot a high school basketball game, and the entire student section was saying, we miss Jeff Russo, who was there before me, over and over again. And it's like, eventually they turn around.
Right.
You know what I mean? But those are kids. This is something different. We'll move on, Andy. We could sit here probably for another 2 hours
the sob stories of TV sports reporters and anchors.
Explain how tough our lives have been to this point. But another round of OTAs coming up next week. And this time, we'll get to hear from Bobby Babich next Tuesday.
Yeah, the two quote-unquote new offensive and defensive coordinator. We're going to ask Bobby Babich, I'm sure, about whether he's going to call the plays.
Right.
Sean McDermott has reiterated pretty much every time we've spoken to him this spring that hasn't been decided, and maybe we'll find out during camp or the preseason, or maybe we never find out. And they hold up their play sheets, and we don't know who's talking and who's calling the plays. Maybe they'll both do it. Who knows? I like Bobby. He's fun.
Bobby's fun.
He's a fun guy to interview, so, we'll have a lot to talk about there. And, everything's focused on the offense, as it always is, even more so this year with all the new receivers and a new full-time offensive coordinator. But there's definitely some storylines on defense that need to be examined.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wrap up, but I've been thinking, is Von Miller going to talk at any point during the spring? I guess we'll find out next Tuesday, and then next Wednesday, Andy and I will be back here with a fresh Buffalo End Zone podcast. So come on back with us.
Like, subscribe, comment, rate us on YouTube. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, our live streams on Facebook. Find us, the Buffalo End Zone podcast. Give us some likes. We could use all the subscribers we get so you can all wallow in our misery.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll see you next week.